such beautiful children. You guys do such a good job. I'm going to tell you a story about a boy named David. Is that funny? I wasn't talking about this David. I'm talking about a different David. We're gonna miss our David, aren't we? This next week, he told me it's his last week here, so we'll all have to just gather around him, give him big hugs, and see if we can hold him back, huh? Yeah. David was born to a family that loved the Lord, and they taught their children to love Jesus. And when he was 9 years old, who's 9? Anybody 9? You're 10 now? Anybody still 9? Or 9 yet? You're not quite 9 yet? No? You're 6. When he was 9, he memorized Psalm 119. Do you know how big a Psalm 119 is?
No, I'm 6.
You're 6? I don't think so. And
I'm 6 right now.
you want to be? Yeah. Psalm 119. How many verses? Anybody know? How many? Did somebody say 176? Yeah, Daddy was right. 176. That is a big chapter. And he could say it by memory to people at 9 years old. And as a gift, he was given the New Testament. That's the last part of the Bible, the part about Jesus there and his life. And it was the greatest gift he ever had. Oh, he loved his Bible and he studied it. And when he turned 10, Andrew's age, here, come here, Andrew. Stand up here. I want everybody to get a good picture of this. He was his age, he started working. He got up, he had to be at work at 6 in the morning. Is that what you do at 6 in the morning?
No.
Okay, good.
I sleep.
At 6 in the morning, he had to be at work. He worked at the mill until 8 o'clock at night. But you know what he did after that? You would think sleep, wouldn't you? No, he went to school. Okay, you go back to your seat. He went to school, night school, and he studied. And David was learning a lot of things, but he was sacrificing so much, getting up so early and working so late and going to school at night. He was pretty tired. He hardly ever had time to eat, time to take care of himself. But their family was poor, and he was trying to do what he could to help. And he was able to buy a book. And he studied from that book. And while he had, in fact, I have a picture of it here, while he had the cotton going on in the press there, he would be studying his book. And he was learning. Well, this one might have been in the picture. I can't tell by the picture if it was his book or the Bible, because it said that it was a book on, let's see, it was a grammar book. So he studied it while the press was going, and then later he decided to go ahead and go to school and learn more, where he learned about the stars and positions of the stars, and he learned all kinds of things about the world and where the countries were, and learned how to do exploring type stuff. You see, there was a missionary that came in, and he so impressed David that he wanted to be a missionary when he grew up. Well, David put the learning to good use, and he realized his dream of becoming a missionary when he went to Africa. Now, some of you may have heard of David. I know there's many in the audience that have heard of him. Do anybody know who I'm talking about yet? Yeah, I hear it all over the room. David Livingstone. He studied so hard, and he learned, and he was a explorer in Africa for 15 years. In there, he went across some of the amazing deserts more than once, where he suffered from so much terrible heat and drought, and he went through and discovered falls let's see, which fall was this one? Actually have it. Victoria Falls. He discovered the Victoria Falls. He went through all kinds of different rivers, and he studied, or he would talk to the people, learn all about them and who they were, and he was able to be a missionary to them, help heal them, take care of them, and the people learned to love him. And eventually he got sick, and he ended up dying. But guess what he was doing when he died? Praying. Did somebody say praying? Yeah. They came in and they found him kneeling beside his bed, praying for the people of Africa. And it says that they trusted him. They wanted to keep him there, of course, and then they wanted him back in his country, and he'd come from Scotland. But here was a man who had sacrificed everything. He even faced a lion. Lion one time grabbed him, and they both fell to the ground and messed up David's shoulder, and it made things hard for him. But David was willing to go through all of this to witness for Jesus. Are you willing to do anything you can to witness for Jesus, to live for him, to be a missionary even at home? All right, you can go back to your seats. All right. Hey, bye-bye. I saw in the bulletin that the special music is a hymn, and I know I'm not leading it.
We can do a duet, Pastor.
We can try.
I invite you to turn to me in your hymnals to number 290. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. You're welcome to stand if you'd like. Oh, soul, are you weary and troubled? No light in the darkness you see. There's light for a look at the Savior, and life more abundant and free. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Through death into life everlasting, he passed and we followed him there. Over us sin no more hath dominion, for more than conquerors we are. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. His word shall not fail you, he promised. Believe him and all will be well. Then go to a world that is
You may be seated. Thank you, Tony. Can't wait to tell my wife that I helped sing for special music today. Last time we were together, we talked about the sanctuary and how David had a desire in his heart to have a better place for God to dwell here among his people. Of course, he wasn't to build it. His son built it, and after all these years and all the detail and everything that was put into it with the most costly materials and everything made just so perfectly, there was a lot of rejoicing in the camp of Israel. The Lord accepted their gift, and the Shekinah glory filled the temple. Of course, the real temple that the Lord has here among men is dwelling in us and through us. But they experienced God and His presence directly with them. It brought rejoicing like nothing had ever brought. But then, after Solomon, came Rehoboam. And then Jeroboam, and so forth, introducing idols. Here is a grand building representing God and His presence with them, and they were introducing idols, gods they made out of sticks and stones that could not see, that could not hear, that could not answer their prayers. And they began to worship the gods of the people who were around them. All of the surrounding nations had seen and heard what God could do, and they had seen how God had blessed. They had visited, came in from all over the place to hear the wisdom of Solomon. They were amazed at the God of Israel. And yet Israel was following after these other gods. I don't think we can emphasize that point enough. I want you to grasp what's really taking place as we go into the story today. They had God as their leader. The God of heavens, the God who spoke this world into existence. They had His presence with them. And yet, they would forget about Him. Yet they would go and serve other gods, doing the things that God had forbidden them to do. 2 Chronicles chapter 14. It is in this context, in this immediate context here, that we come to the story of Asa. The kingdom has been divided, and 10 tribes go with Israel. 2 of them said, no, we're not going to serve your idols. We're not going to serve your gods. And you have Judah and Benjamin that would not be a part of this. And chapter 14, verse 2. Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. Oh, I love that. If we could just let that soak in for a moment. Asa did what was good and right in the sight of the Lord. He was living in a time in which so many of them were worshiping idols. In a time in which, yes, they had the sanctuary before them. They had seen the glory of God. They had experienced His power, and yet they had forgotten Him. They were going other directions and doing all the things that God had said not to do, and following the traditions of what everybody around them was doing. And Asa did what was good and right in the sight of the Lord. What does that look like? Verse 3. He removed the altars of the foreign gods and the high places, and broke down the sacred pillars and cut down the wooden images. He commanded Judah to seek the Lord God of their fathers and to observe the law and the commandment. You see, there's reformation taking place here in Judah. There was reformation taking place here in his kingdom. First, he gets rid of all of these things that were between them and God. God said, "Thou shalt not have any graven images, nor bow down and worship them." Here they have put high places up. They have them out boldly out all over the countryside, and he gets rid of them. Let me tell you something. That wasn't popular. When you're going to go and begin reformation, when you're going to go and try to bring change for the good, and you've got people who have all of this wealth that they're getting from it, and they have all of their customs and all of their culture, and they want to look good among others, etc., 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 it sometimes takes a lot of courage to go forward. Well, Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord. It didn't matter if everybody else was doing something different. Asa was going to do what God said. You know, we think of this as something that when you get old enough, you finally grasp this, but, you know, even our smallest children know the difference. They know when they're doing what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. Young, little tiny children we saw up here for our children's story had the row filled, and I could have asked them, "Is this right or wrong? Is this right or wrong?" And they would have answered right every time, I'm sure. And yet it's so easy to get caught up in what everyone else is doing. Asa did what was right. He went through and destroyed all of this, and he brought them back to the Word of God. He went back to the commandments, back to the law of God, and looked to see what was right and to follow and to walk in God's ways. He removed the high places, the incense altars from all the cities of Judah. And what was the result? The end of verse 5. It says that it was quiet all around him. You see, there's blessings and curses for obeying and disobeying the law of God. If we are going to obey Him, if we're going to walk in His ways, we can expect His blessings from His immediate presence. But if He is going to be here with us and we're going to choose to disobey, there is going to be consequences that Leviticus 26 puts. It calls it curses. Here, he began to experience the blessings. The kingdom was quiet. And while this kingdom was quiet, they had no war. They were able to build. They built and fortified the cities. They built up the walls. They built their armies. Verse 8, he had an army of 300,000 and then 280,000 who carried the shields and drew the bows. And, you know, so for a total of 580,000, these are not experienced, weathered soldiers. These are people that he was training up into the army, but they were not valiant warriors. But as it turns out, the Ethiopian came out against them with an army of 1,300,000 chariots, and then some. And these were seasoned warriors. What chance do you think that Judah had against this huge army of over 1,000,000 people coming at them? You know, I've had to face some challenges in my life. I've gone through a few difficulties, not like some of you may have had to go through, but each one of us can say, okay, I've had to face a challenge in my life, right? Anybody here that just never had any challenges? Has anybody here had to go up against 1,000,000 plus? This is a challenge that I've never had to deal with. In my mind, I can't even fathom it. They had no chance up against them. And they went out, gathered up the armies. Verse 11, Asa cried out to the Lord his God. What is the answer for every challenge we face? Is it not to turn back to the Lord our God? Asa had done what was right. He had done what was good in the eyes of God. He had been brought up maybe in a home that didn't necessarily always do what was right, but he knew who his God was. And he made his commitment to honor God. God had blessed him. And he knew to turn to his God in his time of need. He said, Lord, it is nothing for you to help. I love these words. You know, there are times in which we face these difficulties and we think, man, there's no solution. I don't know how I'm going to make it through. Why does God not open a path? Where's my answers? And we just sit there and get so worked up. And yet Asa says, Lord, it's nothing for you. It's an army of 1 million plus. What is that to God? Nothing. It is nothing to you to help, whether with many or with those who have no power. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rest on you, and in your name we go out against this multitude. O Lord, you are our God. Do not let man prevail against you. He recognizes that this wasn't his battle, but the battle belongs to the Lord. You guys, we're in a battle. We're in a war. There's an enemy going out trying to destroy us, trying to get you to do what is wrong in the eyes of the Lord, trying to pull you away, and he will come in and divide. He will come in and get your eyes off of God in any way that he can. And the appeal from God is to turn back to him, to look to him, to trust in him. In your name, we go against this multitude. Don't let them have this victory. God, this is in your name. This is for you. And so the Lord struck the Ethiopians. He gave Judah complete victory. They pursued after them, and they went after them to get much spoil. And while they're at it, they defeated all the cities around them, because it says the fear of the Lord came upon all of those towns around. They saw the power of God. 1 million plus, great army, the most powerful army, I assume, of the world at that time, came up against these inexperienced, much smaller army, and they stood no chance because God was on their side. And they saw this. Everyone experienced it now. They knew, watch out, for God is with his people. Now the Spirit of the Lord came upon Azariah, chapter 15, the son of Oded. And he went out to meet Asa, and he said to him, Hear me, Asa, and all Judah and Benjamin. The Lord is with you while you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. God has always had his messengers. From the very beginning all the way to the very end, God has his prophets, his people who give messages to the people. We're not to despise these prophesyings, but we're to test them to see if they're of God. Does it follow what the scriptures say? Does it agree with the Bible? Does it lift up Jesus? Does the prophet now live according to the way of God? And finally, do the prophecies come true that the prophet gives? There are tests that the Bible gives. Asa is now facing a prophet, and he's got a choice. Many kings shut the prophets up. They would throw them in prison. They would lock them up. They would have them killed. Different scenarios. Asa chose to listen to the prophet. He listened to all that the prophet had said. He recognized that what he was telling him was from the Bible. If you obey, you've got the blessings. If you disobey, there's the curses. If I follow with God, if I walk with God, God is going to be with me. But if I now turn and follow after all of the gods of Jeroboam and the gods of all of these other countries all about, I know that God is not going to bless. He recognized this. He honored it. The end of the prophecy here, verse 7 says, "But you be strong. Do not let your hands be weak, for your work shall be rewarded." It was a promise directly from God to him. God has given you and I a promise. He is said to go out in the authority and the power of all heaven and earth, and that he would be with you. He is said to be faithful, to walk after his ways, to not listen to what everybody else around you is saying with the TVs and the radios and all the other groups and the traditions and everything else that's out there, but follow his word and search for him, and he will be found by you. And to walk in his ways, not leaning on our own understanding, but trusting in him. He has promised to be with us all the way to the end of the world, that he would never leave us nor forsake us. And the promises just keep rolling off our tongues. Promise after promise after promise. Notice how this prophet put it. Don't let your hands be weak. In other words, don't just kind of go about this work. Don't just do a little bit here, but pour your heart into it, because God is with you. He's going to bless, and you're going to see the fruit of your labors. And when Asa heard these words, I want you to catch this, verse 8. He heard the words and the prophecy of Oded the prophet. He took courage and removed the abominable idols from the land of Judah and Benjamin, and from the cities which had taken in the mountains of Ephraim, and he restored the altar of the Lord. I want you to see that. When you listen to the words from God through the prophets that he gives us, you take courage. You're not in this alone. When you are facing your challenges, when you're trying to figure out how you're going to show somebody what the Bible is saying, and you don't know the words, you don't know the right way to turn, you call upon the Lord, and he gives you the direction. When you can't figure out how you're going to pay that next month's rent, you call upon the Lord, you walk faithfully in his ways, you don't find some way to cheat somebody else out, but you faithfully call upon him, he always comes through. He gives us the ability to take courage to be faithful to him. He removed these idols. He got rid of all of these things, but notice what he also did. This is in a time in which they have just built the glorious, beautiful sanctuary to God, and here he's going back and restoring the altar of the Lord. If there was anything lacking among the people of God here in these last days, I'd say it was this right here. It's time to restore the altar of the Lord. It's time that our families get back on their knees together and be praying for God and for the presence of God. It's time for our church family to come together and to, in one accord, be praying for the power and the promised Holy Spirit, that He will fill our place and fill our hearts, fill the lives of our children and our families, that we can walk forward and be strong in Him and take, not worrying about any enemy that's out there seeking to destroy, because he's been cast down, but focusing on the one who has promised to come back for us, who is preparing a place for us in His Father's house. He built, restored the altar of the Lord. You know, when God does great things among His people, others take notice. There were many in Israel who were a part of this idolatry and a part of all of these high places and popular places to worship. When they saw that God was blessing Judah, they came streaming in. They wanted to be a part of that. God says He has people in every walk here in this world. When the world can see God's presence here among His people, when they can see the power that the people of God have here in these last days, because the people of God have been on their knees, they've been praying, they've been calling out to God, because they have been faithful to God. They are preaching the prophecies of the Scriptures. They're not kind of saying, well, okay, let's be politically correct here, and let's watch out for this, and this kind of tiptoe around this issue. But the people of God are boldly pronouncing the words of God in the power of God. Having been in His presence on a daily basis, the people are going to see that there is a God among us, and that we are faithful to Him, and that they can come in and be a part of that. I believe there will be people who will be streaming in from all walks. They offered up sacrifices to God. Verse 12, 2 Chronicles 15:12. They entered into a covenant to seek the Lord God of their fathers with all their heart and with all their souls. This is the secret to making it through in the last days. Can I make it through the time of trouble? Can I make it through these challenges with all of the confusion that's out there? And some people saying this and some people saying that. Can I make it through? Yes, I can, if I seek the Lord with all my heart and all my soul. Made a mistake here right after that in the same verse. And they pronounced a death decree upon everyone who didn't do it. Now, this was a theocracy. If Asa could recognize he was not really the king, but God was the king, and that God was the one that could judge the hearts and so forth. But there's a precedent set here that we find picked up again in Revelation chapter 13, where there's going to be a death decree upon people who actually seek after God, who actually are obedient to God, and it's flipped around. The Bible doesn't give record of what they or who they killed or if they did or how many. It doesn't tell us how many will die at the end. But what it does tell us is that if you're faithful to Him, He's going to be faithful to you. And when we are willing to follow Him, even at the cost of a death decree, we can stand in courage, knowing that we're walking in His way. We're not just trying to make it through because our friends are making it through, but we have learned to trust in God, to listen to His prophets, to follow His word, and now we're going to be able to make it through no matter what decree they pronounce. Verse 15, here's the result of this kind of reformation. Here's the result of people coming together and seeking God with all their hearts. This is what it looks like when people seek God with their whole soul. All Judah rejoiced at the oath, for they had sworn with all their heart and sought him with all their soul, and he was found by them, and the Lord gave them rest all around. I love this passage. What is the result? What should we be expecting when we serve God with all of our heart? I don't care what the enemy brings. I don't care what challenges you face, what health issues you see, whatever you go through. If I am seeking God with all of my heart and following him with all of my soul, it's going to bring a rejoicing. There is something about it that helps me realize that I can take courage knowing who my God is. They sought him with all his soul. So he removed also his grandmother, because she had made an obscene image. You know, this wasn't just any obscene image, but this woman was actually the granddaughter of Absalom. And when she saw the people seeking God with all their heart, and she saw this reformation taking place, and the rejoicing of all of Judah as they are now seeking after God, she puts out this image. She puts out this God to try to distract from, to try to bring down and try to put down these people. And Asa immediately removes her from being queen mother. Gone. And he cuts down the image, destroys this image. And it says, the heart of Asa was loyal all his days. And I'm going to end with that first, because we don't want to look at chapter 16, where he then forgets about God, seeks after the Assyrians, and takes the money out of the temple of God, all the gold and silver out of God's temple, to now call upon the armies of Syria, and how he ends up with a disease in his feet, and instead of calling upon God, he calls upon the doctors, and it says he was faithful all his days. And yet the next chapter shows his downfall. God is faithful and just. He will not leave his people. He will always pick you up and carry you through. You have the choice to remain faithful to him. Asa had done so many good things. He had turned the hearts of Judah back to God. And yet how easy it is to get our eyes off of God ourselves. Ultimately, what are we saying here? Seek God while he may be found. Search for him with all your heart, mind, and soul. He will lead you into all truth. He will show you the right way to walk. He will guide your footsteps. And he will prepare you to be an overcomer, to make it through all the way to the end. Today, will you consecrate your hearts to God? In your very heart of hearts, will you commit, God, I don't want to just believe everything that's out there in the world. I want to know your truth. I want to seek your will from the scriptures. I want to follow you 100%. Will you commit to walk with God as he is preparing a place with your name? Will you completely and totally consecrate yourselves to God? Stand right where you're at saying, God, I will, because I know who I have believed in. I know that he is able to take it and carry me all the way through to the very end.
I invite you to turn with me in your hymnals to page 511. I know